I never thought a simple conversation could change everything. But
Oh,
that
that
night,
is too
it
funny.
did. My
I
name's
can't believe you
Marcus,
said that.
and I'd been dating Evelyn for about 3 months. Things were going well, or so I thought. We laughed, we talked late into the night, and for the first time in a while I felt like someone truly got me. But Evelyn had this rule, one I couldn't bend. She refused to cut ties with her ex. Not because she was in love with him anymore, but because, in her words, I won't just erase a part of my past because you ask. I laughed at first, thinking she was joking. But the more I pressed, the more I realized she meant it. She had friends who were constantly bringing him up, checking in with him, sometimes even casually texting late at night. It wasn't jealousy that hit me first. It was confusion, the kind that wraps around your chest and makes it hard to breathe. How could she expect me to feel secure when her world still revolved, in some small ways, around someone else? I tried to push past it. I focused on the moments we had, the dinners, the walks, the coffee mornings where she would smile at me like I was the only person in the room. But every time her phone buzzed or a name popped up that I recognized, that feeling came back, unease. And then came the idea I never imagined I'd consider. Her friends. Those same friends who were flirty, playful, always laughing at my jokes with a look in their eyes that made me think maybe they noticed something she didn't. At first, it felt petty, almost childish. But the more Evelyn insisted she wouldn't change, the more I realized I had to reclaim some kind of emotional ground for myself. So I started noticing the small things. How Lila, her friend from work, would brush her hair back in a way that made her eyes meet mine longer than necessary. How Jenna, the one she always called to vent about ex-drama, would linger over messages, tagging me in inside jokes. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't planning anything malicious. I just wanted to remind Evelyn that she couldn't dictate my world, that I had value and attention she couldn't monopolize. The first night I went out with Lila, it was simple. Drinks, casual conversation, the kind of playful banter that makes you forget the clock. But inside, part of me was aware I was sending a message. I wasn't sure if it was ethical, but my emotions had been pushed to a tipping point. Felt like a balance I had to restore. As the week went on, I saw it. Evelyn's texts became more frequent, slightly sharper, sometimes filled with emojis that were meant to mask concern but failed. She noticed. She noticed I wasn't just sitting idle. I wasn't just waiting for her to make me feel comfortable in a world where her past was always present. And yet, she didn't scold me, didn't lash out. She just laughed. The same laugh that used to warm me, but now it carried an edge of disbelief, like she couldn't believe I'd actually respond in kind. One evening, I caught myself thinking about what this was all turning into. I wasn't just reacting. I was living, making choices I hadn't dared to consider before. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about clarity, about understanding what kind of relationship I deserved. And as that thought settled in, I realized something important. Sometimes, silence speaks louder than confrontation. Sometimes, what you don't say defines the boundary just as clearly as anything you can. By the middle of the week, I had begun to notice a change in her tone, the little shifts in text and conversation. Evelyn started asking me questions, casual ones at first, about my day, my plans for the weekend, but they were loaded. Beneath her light words, there was curiosity, maybe even fear, and a hint of jealousy I hadn't expected. It was subtle, like the faint tremor of a hand holding a cup, but unmistakable once you paid attention. I remember sitting on my balcony that night, the city lights scattered below like a river of gold, thinking about how strange relationships are, how fragile, how easy it is to lose a sense of control. And then I realized, just because someone refuses to close a chapter of their past doesn't mean you have to stand still. Sometimes you write your own pages alongside theirs, even if it shakes the foundations of what they think they own. That's when I pulled out my phone and texted Jenna, inviting her for a coffee the next day. My heart was pounding, not from fear but from anticipation. I knew Evelyn would find out eventually, and deep down, part of me wanted her to, because I had reached the point where I wouldn't apologize for taking up my own space, for reminding her that I mattered too. If you've ever felt unseen in a relationship, hit like and share this story. It might reach someone who needs to hear it. The next morning, I met Jenna at the small cafe around the corner from my apartment. She smiled when she saw me, that same mischievous glint in her eyes that made it hard to think straight. Conversation flowed effortlessly. We laughed about mundane things, shared stories about our work, and I noticed a subtle shift in my own confidence. I wasn't just reacting to Evelyn anymore. I was living my life, asserting my boundaries, and discovering parts of myself I hadn't allowed to breathe. By the afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn. "Marcus, what are you doing? I don't appreciate these games." I paused before replying, letting her words linger. I knew the tension I was creating wasn't just a fluke. It was intentional, but it wasn't cruel either. It was a mirror. I responded simply, "I'm living. You said you won't cut ties, so I'm just existing in my own space." Her reply didn't come immediately, and that was fine. That silence, heavier than any argument, said more than words could. For the first time, I realized I wasn't trying to punish her. I was testing the invisible boundaries she had set. And as the hours passed, I felt a strange sense of calm. A week into this, I noticed she started observing me differently. Her comments tinged with curiosity, frustration, and maybe a touch of admiration. Comment below if you've ever had to reclaim your own space in a relationship. What did you do and how did it make you feel? I'd love to hear your experiences. By midweek, things escalated in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. Evelyn invited me over for dinner. The tone was casual, but I could feel her studying me, measuring, maybe even questioning her own choices. That night, I arrived prepared to be myself, nothing more, nothing less. I laughed, shared stories, and let the moment carry its own weight. And when she brought up her ex, nonchalantly, almost innocently, I didn't flinch. I simply nodded, took a sip of my drink, and let the silence speak for itself. It worked. The subtle tension in the air shifted. Evelyn leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly, and I realized she was seeing me in a new light. Not as someone who begged, not as someone who tolerated her terms, but as someone who valued himself enough to act. And maybe, just maybe, that recognition sparked a tiny ember of respect or even fear that she couldn't ignore. I started spending more time with Lila and Jenna, keeping things light but deliberate. There were playful touches, inside jokes, and moments that reminded me I wasn't invisible, I wasn't secondary. Evelyn noticed, of course. She would text, sometimes subtly probing, sometimes accusing, but I maintained my composure. I didn't explain myself. I didn't defend my actions. I simply existed in my newfound space. Type boundaries in the comments if you've ever had to set firm limits in a relationship, and let's discuss how it changed your dynamic. Then came the evening that changed everything. Evelyn called me, voice trembling slightly. "Marcus, I didn't expect you to." I stopped her before she could continue. "Evelyn, I'm not here to punish. I'm here to live. You chose your boundaries. I chose mine." Her silence after that was telling. She wasn't angry. She was processing. And in that quiet moment, I realized something important. Respect isn't demanded. It's observed. When you act with integrity, when you value yourself even in the face of someone else's defiance, the narrative shifts. The balance doesn't tip toward vengeance. It tips toward clarity. A week later, Evelyn approached me, not with an ultimatum, not with anger, but with honesty. "Marcus, I think I underestimated what it means to see you on your terms. I need space to understand my own choices." I nodded. I smiled softly. "I understand, and I respect that. But know this, I'll never diminish my value for someone who can't see it." In that moment, I realized the power wasn't in the games, the flirtations, or even the careful moves with her friends. The power was in authenticity, in standing firm, in reclaiming my own life without apology. Evelyn's laughter, once a source of warmth, had become a symbol of the line she couldn't cross. And by honoring myself, I didn't just create boundaries. I sparked a shift she couldn't ignore. If you've ever had to stand your ground in love or life, like this video, comment with your story, and subscribe to explore more stories of self-respect and personal growth. Share it with someone who needs this reminder. By the end of that week, I realized something crucial: relationships aren't about control, they're about mutual respect. And when someone refuses to respect the rules of your heart, sometimes the only choice left is to honor yourself. Evelyn didn't change overnight, and maybe she never would. But I had changed. I had reclaimed my confidence, my voice, my life. And that, I realized, was worth more than any compromise. The irony? In standing my ground, the connections I'd built with her friends and my own inner strength made me feel freer than I'd ever been. Evelyn could laugh, argue, resist, but she couldn't undo the clarity I'd found in myself. And in that clarity, I knew one truth. Sometimes the strongest love you can have is the one you give yourself.